Okay, it's my great pleasure to welcome all you to this session 2.2, educators, school administrators and professors in vocational and tertiary level forestry programs in this International Conference on Forestry Education 2021. My name is Mika Rekola. I'm university lecturer working at the University of Helsinki, Finland, and it's my great pleasure to be the moderator here. We have other people in this session to help me. Saija Papunen is making notes, being the rapporteur, and we have Konsta Vilenius as a facilitator to help you if you have any problems with technical problems with Zoom, or you want to have a voice or something like that. He will help us. And then we have two speakers, Nevgi and Wilson Kasolo, and I will introduce you more in detail in a minute. So let's start. Let me give you a little bit background. I would like to say that the educators at all levels are really having a key role in terms of teaching performance and thus learning outcomes. Of course, it's the students who finally do the work, the learning, but educators have really a big role how it all goes. And this session is about technical and vocational education and training, TVET, and universities and colleges. So let's keep that in mind. So we are not going to discuss about the primary and secondary education. And the perspective is administrators, teachers. However, if there are other people, you are warmly welcome and share your views, because this is our common issue. The program for this 90 minutes is following. I will let you to know each other. So there is a handy way to do that. We will see in a minute. And then I will give you a little bit more focus and aims of the session. And we then do the first like assignment and activating. And after that, we have two keynote addresses. And then we do a discussion. That's in quotations, because we are so many and we cannot anymore have breakout rooms in this breakout room. But let's see, we are now 45 people. This could be even a discussion, and we are using some platforms how to do this so that everyone can have your voice in a way. And then conclusions and way forward. Okay, now let's do the introduction part. There is a system which is called Flinga. That has been invented, and the company is running here in Finland. There are many these kind of similar systems all around, but I would like now you to do this. I try to copy paste the link to the chat. Now here you go. So the link is now in the chat. So please follow the link. And the idea is that you will shortly describe yourself in this system, using this system, and you establish. You just place your role there, where you are, in which continent, and what is your role. So please okay, this is interesting. So teachers, you should do it with blue. and the others with orange, and leaders with green. So once you have made yourself here, just move you to in a correct place in terms of continents. So you will appear always in the middle. So please move you a little bit away from the center. So this is one of the not the best properties of this system, that you will always appear in the middle. So you have to move you forward. Okay, and we have a first people who were able to attach a photo here. So please, once you appear in the screen, move your into the continent where you are located. If you have something very big problems or something, you can simply ask more advice. Even open your mic. I think we are so few, you can do that. So leaders use green color. You can do it here. Colors are over here, and then you can select the feature here, like a person, and then in a message write your name and affiliation. Okay, people are coming. It looks like they are people from all continents. Most of you are, I see, from Europe, but also quite many from North America, Latin America, 2 from Africa, and 2 people from Asia. Very good. Yep. So let's close this, and as you see, there are always some challenges you have to learn how to use these systems, and this is a tricky issue. I go back to the presentation and continue that. Can anyone say that you can now see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can.
Good. Focus is teaching competence. With teaching competence, we mean like a pedagogical knowledge, skills, motives, and attitudes, experiences as a teacher. So all these makes you effective in a specific context. So we had to stress this one. So there is not that kind of a generic competence of teaching. Of course, there are many elements of these competency which are really adapted to many other circumstances, but I would say that the university teaching is somewhat different than for example, primary or kindergarten teaching. Assessing teaching competence in university or TVET level could be done with several kinds of tools. For example, CV portfolio or teaching demonstrations in recruitment phase. It could be used when the development of teaching is made during your teaching career using self-assessment systems. There are many, or portfolio again, and how the compensation, how you are rewarded. This is typically made using tenure track system or a part or equivalent for that, or something as one of the components could be student feedback, for instance. Okay, so we have 4 aims. We have 4 questions that we try to answer during this session. They are: first, how teaching competencies is or should be assessed when the recruitment of teachers is performed in vocational and tertiary level education. So what are the innovative procedures and systems? Then we want to know what are the biggest challenges that leaders are facing when they do the recruitment, and what are the biggest challenges that teacher is facing when applying for a teaching position. And then finally, how to support development of teachers' competency from the viewpoints of administrators and teachers. So these 4 questions we want to have. And now, Saija or Konsta, could you help me and copy paste the Flinga address into chat? Very good, very good. So then let's next have your first quick insight into these questions using again this Flinga system. And this is just a very quick first like a pre-ideas, what's going on. So they don't have to be really deep, but first perceptions, preconditions that you see. Take 1 or 2 questions. Don't try to answer all. Take 1 or 2 questions which are most interesting to you, and make again your comment. And if you can use those color symbols, so that comments by teachers in blue color and comments by leaders in green and others in orange, that would be interesting. In the best case, we can do a small study using this data. Anything to ask? Can you follow instructions? And again, when you write something, it appears in the middle, and then like that, someone made move it right away to the right position. Very good. So we have 2 comments already here. So just your first insights. Don't use too much time for thinking. What is there in the surface in your mind? Record that. Very good. We are going to have, in all questions, we are going to have some answers and some comments. The one that is now in the middle, teachers are faced with rigid syllabus to follow. Please, who make this where it should be? Okay. So please, you can move. You all can move all of this, but please try not to unintentionally move other comments than yours. Okay, so just have a quick look what we have here in teaching competence, how it should be assessed. Field experience, they should have to teach students something at interview, okay? So like a demonstration. Exemplary lectures, these are two which are similar issues, I guess. By complex, long adaptive and auditable process. Teachers should have field experience. This is more or less same. So they should record somehow their experience. Question 2, what are the biggest challenges that leaders are facing? A lot of paperwork, lack of candidates with low knowledge, okay? Not enough qualified candidates here, they are all related to each other. The really good people earn more in sector other than do teaching. Okay, they are all, I think, related to each other. The third question asks, what are the biggest challenges that teacher is facing? This is a long answer. As a master in forestry and being in forest research, I find non-forestry background people having better opportunities or rather eligibility to forest teaching than forestry person. Okay, let's move on a little bit this in the middle so that we can see better. And then relocation. When to become a teacher after field experience, after studies, what is the path? Okay, limited no of vacancies, differences in pedagogy between institutions. Okay, gaining teaching experience always classed as essential. And then this is a long story. I think I have to move on to just have the quick look. How to support development. Assessment has to be rigorous and continual, okay? Time-based in business upskills workers is very important. Permanent and continued capacitation. Support throughout in-service training. Okay, very good. So we have your first insights. We can now move on. Thanks a lot for active working now. We can move on.
Mika, you are mute.
Thanks, Norbert. Yes, I was asking, can you see my PowerPoint slides? I hope you can see.
Yes, we
Very good. Thanks again, Norbert. So it's a pleasure to introduce you to Adjunct Professor, University Lecturer Anne Nevgi. He has a long experience. He's really has a deep insight in this topic, teaching competency, and especially at the university level. He's one of the founding members of the pedagogical training for teachers at the University of Helsinki. She has made the curricula at some time ago. And she belongs to the Center of University Teaching and Learning, Hype, and also affiliated with the Helsinki Institute of Sustainable Science, HELSUS. And she is a founding member of Caledonia Campus Learning and Development Initiatives. So Anne will tell us now about how to assess the teaching competency in the universities. Anne, please. And I think you may try to share your screen if that's possible. I'm not quite sure. Let's see.
I'll try to share my screen. You just stop sharing and then.
Yes, very good. I will stop it.
You need to give me a right to share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, just a minute. It looks like, yes, this was a little bit unsure how it goes. I cannot give you the right, yeah.
Okay.
This is what was warned us for some reason, technical reason. So let me do it this way, that I will run it here, and then you just just say next please, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, here you go. And then now you should see it. Can you see Anna's presentation?
Yes, I can see my own presentation, assessing teaching competency. And okay, it's just as briefly, you already introduced me, and so I'm very happy here to be with all of you, though I cannot see you personally, but I hope that you will find some ideas from my presentation. Next slide, please. Yes, so briefly, my aim is to tell you about why is teaching so difficult for academics. I'm starting from that point, and then I'm going through that academics as researchers, and then that is teaching is something that counts. And then I somehow discuss also about teaching competency for school teachers and teaching competency in higher education, how they are a little bit different. And then I also asked you the question about this, whether this teaching experience is something that will increase teaching competency of academics. And then finally, I will end my presentation how to assess teaching competency and what kind of criteria you can use for teaching competency. And then I present evaluation matrix of teaching competency. So please, next slide. So first of this is that this James F.G.F. Forrest in his article has said, teaching is perhaps the most difficult and complex responsibility for the members of academic profession. Because teaching is something that starts from textbook selection to classroom management and organization and giving and grading exams. Teaching requires a considerable commitment of time, energy, and skill. But why is teaching so difficult for academics and for also vocational, those teachers who have come from vocational and who have a practice-based background? So next slide. So I can think about it is something which is a combination. When we think about school teachers, they are professional teachers. But when we come to the role academics, the academics have always two roles. They are researchers. The research is their main task. Most of them are research. And then when they are starting their career in academia, in university level, in colleges, and then they come to know that teaching is something that comes besides, that they are also supposed that they should teach. So, and this is something research, which is during last 30 years, it has been a lot taught about what is this research teaching nexus in university teaching and what it means. And so next slide, please. So with this discussion, please copy back. Still one. This was my next. So scholarship of teaching. This scholarship of teaching is that scholarship of teaching and learning. This is something because it is 1990s. Ernst Boyer called for a broader definition of the work of faculty members or academics or researchers, scholars. And thinking about academic work, he was saying that there should be a scholarship of discovery, as thinking about like a discovery meaning as a research, scholarship of integration meaning as a scholarship of integrating this research into teaching, and then application research outcomes to or something that you are creating something new, and then scholarship of teaching. But then it is also during the 1990s, it was a lot done research on about what it means, that scholarship of teaching. And then distinction began to emerge between excellent teaching, scholarly teaching, and the scholarship of teaching and learning. Excellent teaching is something that is when you are professional, you have a teaching profession, you are very excellent and good in your teaching, you reflect and you have your good teaching skills and you use many teaching methods and you are very excellent and effective in teaching. Scholarly teaching is something that is mainly more about when we think about academics teaching based on his research. And then scholarship of teaching and learning is something that you are also, as an academic, researching your own teaching and your students' learning. So that scholarship of teaching and learning, it also emerged to be as some kind of new paradigm or new outline for researching and especially we in university pedagogy and who are researching higher education, especially academics development as a teachers, we have been combined our efforts with this doing research on scholarship of teaching and learning. So next slide. So when we think about this teaching in academia, we can think about, and this comes from that article, Kern, Metendal, Dixon, and Morgan, their idea. We can think about that when your teacher in a higher education is developing as a teacher. And then there is something that we can think that then whether it is informal working or if it is systematic, whether developing teaching systematic way or just in a practice in an informal way, and whether that developing of teaching is private or whether it is more public. And so when you are developing your in an informal way, and then it is your practice of teaching, all what you are doing in your teaching, you can document that. You can add that to all what kind of teaching methods you use, what kind of student feedback you get, what kind of teaching material to develop, everything, and you can include this in your private teaching portfolio. And then you can share all this, or what you have learned in teaching, sharing about your teaching. You can collaborate with your colleagues and other stakeholders to improve the quality of teaching of department of the university or the faculty or in your discipline. And you can share something from your teaching portfolio with your peers and that's where you are sharing. And this is like an informal way of developing your teaching and developing your teaching competency. But then you can be also more systematic, thinking about that more, you are developing your teaching more systematic way and scholarly teaching, and you become scholarly in your teaching when you start reading literature, pedagogical research literature. You participate in the pedagogical training, like a pedagogical development courses, workshops, and seminars. And that's where you increase your pedagogical knowledge and you become more expert in matters of pedagogy. And then scholarship of teaching and learning is then that when you are more systematic way, you engage to inquire teaching and learning, and then you go also to conferences and publish, present in conferences what you are doing research, and then you write peer-reviewed scholarly articles, maybe together with some more pedagogy advanced scholar or your own. So that's the way it is. Scholarship of teaching and learning is something that you are systematically developing your teaching and your teaching competency, doing also research on your teaching or on your students' learning. Then next slide. So then I come to back, this is what about teaching competency of school teachers? Because now when we think about, I started from these academics, their teaching competency is something emerging from their experience and experts, that they are experts in their discipline. But when we come to this teaching competency of school teachers, we can see there are some criteria for that. Next slide. So teaching competency for school teachers, there are many ways to define what is teaching competency of school teachers. And these are quite a general way with which I have collected here. It is like an instructional effectiveness that you are doing, you have a very good subject knowledge, you have very good knowledge about pedagogical matters, you have very good pedagogical thinking, and so you can teach effective way so that your students are learning. That is the outcome of your teaching and instruction, is that your students, your pupils are learning. And that means that you are capable to manage classroom interactions, organize classroom interactions and classroom sessions, face-to-face learning sessions, so that your pupils can concentrate to their learning. And then you are using formative assessment so that you are all the time keeping eye on how your students are learning, how your pupils are learning, whether they have some difficulties, and you are giving continuously feedback to your students, like in the form of feed forward, promoting their progress in learning. And then you have personal competencies, soft skills, but that means that you are very good in communicating, you have an understanding of other people's feelings and emotions, that you can immediately see if there is something going on, what is happening in a classroom, whether some student or pupil is having some problems. And then, because teaching is an ethical profession, then you have also ethical understanding and you have cultural knowledge. We can also add here nowadays also that you have more knowledge about these digital tools and everything. But then it is so that the list will continue from here, but here are something which are very good ones. And then we can continue. When we think about these, we go back to this teaching competency in higher education. So please, next slide. Teaching competency in higher education is also something that is having this similar, so that you are effective teacher, you are effective. So, but then you are having this something which I want to have here, this pedagogical content knowledge. And with pedagogical content knowledge, that I will mean that you have a content knowledge, you have a deep understanding about your discipline, the research, what you are doing, the research field where you have a very good experience and expertise in your research field. And then you add to that your pedagogical knowledge, so that you have a knowledge and about theories of teaching and learning, and you can combine these together. So your pedagogical content knowledge means that you know how to teach your students, how to teach this specific subject, this specific discipline. because all the disciplines have a little bit different knowledge background and research ways of research, how to do it. So as a pedagogical content knowledge means that you can combine these and you know how to teach in especially this one. And even especially I like to highlight that in higher education, teaching is also an ethical profession, and so is research. Teaching is something because as a higher education teacher, you must always be aware about that you are fair with your students and you treat them well, and you are, especially when it comes, for example, to questions of assessment. So next slide, please. So here is then what I think about what is this effective lecturing and teaching. When teaching competency in higher education, there are many ideas, but we start with the effective lecturing and teaching. So when you are good in your lecturing, that means that you can motivate your students, you are enthusiastic, and then you can organize your teaching material for teaching and learning. You are clarity and thoughtful with your ideas. But then it is also something that you have a sense of humor, and you keep eye contact with your students, and you utilize student-centered approach in teaching, so that you can engage your students. This is quite high ideas that how to be a good lecturer and in your teaching. But then you have also your competency is that you are enhancing classroom discussion and organizing group work. So that you must have some knowledge of group dynamics. You must enhance inquiry and research-based learning. You know how to engage students to themselves identify what are problems, and engage students to work with the problem-based learning or case studies, project-based learning. And then you can organize your supervision and seminars so the students become engaged and share the knowledge between each other and discuss. And then another part is in your teaching competency is assessment for learning. That knowledge of that if you are having a very good competence in assessment of for learning, that means that you must have knowledge of different assessment practices. You must knowledge of why and the purpose of the assessment. And you can integrate your assessment in the teaching and learning process of your course and class. And then to be an expert in assessment means that also you have ethical understanding, ethical knowledge, and you have a fair and open assessment practices, and you can have explicit criteria so that your students know how they are assessed and why they are assessed and what is the purpose of the assessment. So these are maybe this effective lecturing, collaborative learning in terms of enhancing classroom discussion, and then assessment learning is more about these teaching competencies. But then you have for teaching competence in higher education, you must think about that because you base your research understanding, you must enhance, you are also capable to enhance critical thinking and research development of your students so that you can guide them to become researchers. And that means that you must have also theoretical understanding or supervisory process so that you have also deep and broad knowledge of your own discipline and research. And you have ethical commitment as a supervisor, and you can communicate with your students, and you have interpersonal skills that you can understand your supervisees, and you know when you can challenge them, that and sometimes then you know that you can a little bit give more fair time for them. But then there is also still this with the red, this idea, what is the teaching competency in higher education should include is that continuous professional development. That means that you are always increasing your pedagogical knowledge and skills by reading research literature, participating in different pedagogical development courses. That you are researching your students' learning, developing your pedagogical knowledge and skills, and you are developing your assessment practices, and you are utilizing these interactive feedback, feed-forward practices. So to develop the course so that you are integrating, you are not only asking feedback from your students at the end of your course, but you are also asking in the beginning of the course and the middle of the course. And all this is possible only if you are slowly growing to become more self-aware about what kind of teacher you are, that you are reflecting your actions and how you are working and how you are teaching and what is the influence of your teaching to your students' learning. And then you are also developing to yourself some professional identity as a teacher. And as you have a professional identity as a researcher, but then you are adding to that your professional identity as a teacher. So we can continue. Next slide. So then there is one question, because when we come to think about this assessing the teaching competency, there is teaching experience. Does teaching experience increase your teaching competency? It may be like intuitively you think that a teaching experience increases teaching competency, but it is not actually so. We can continue to the next slide. And because I come back to this here is that the scholarly teaching, and so you can think that you are developing all the way as a teacher and doing all this systematic maybe, but if you are not doing this, if you are not reflecting, you can push that. I think there is still that addition that I did. Because this is that what I have done long with research with my colleagues is that without reflection and without developing systematically one's teaching experience does not have impact on teaching competency. It doesn't change anything in one's teaching if a person is not systematically also reflecting teaching practices and how he is or she is teaching. So we go next slide. So this is that when we think about, and we have many times in all, and even in our universities in this teaching evaluation maths, we have this idea that the experience in teaching is increasing your teaching competency. But we must remember that it is not exactly just to have an experience in teaching is increasing your teaching competency. You need something else also. So when we think about what kind of criteria to use, maybe we can think that for teachers, pedagogical thinking, pedagogical philosophy, maybe we need to find out something about that. And maybe we need to know something about whether they do develop their teaching. Do they have any pedagogical development, or do they have any pedagogical development projects? And what kind of teaching and learning materials do applicants have? And whether they have participated in any developing of the quality of teaching in their department, or whether they have any other activities to develop teaching in university level, or they participate in conferences or something, and what kind of supervision experience they do have. So defining the criteria of teaching competency is a bit challenging. And next slide. So we have developed in our University of Helsinki teaching evaluation matrices, and these are basically the same. And the idea is that they are a matrix, so that we think about there is a criteria. And when you start with the criteria, you must think about what are the main areas of teaching competency and include these into those criteria. So like a pedagogical knowledge and skills may be like one criteria, or content knowledge like expertise in research or expertise in a discipline or something. Or you can add criteria of technological knowledge and skills, or how they are developing teaching practices. And then to write and make this kind of matrix, you must also think about how to describe, for example, how to describe that you are excellent your person is having excellent pedagogical knowledge, and how to describe whether that knowledge is limited or basic pedagogical knowledge, and whether it is a good or good pedagogical knowledge or skills. And that is a lot of effort to do and create this kind of matrix. And I will continue to present this Faculty of Agriculture, Forest and Agriculture this hour. So next slide. This is just so that you can take that also, but here is those criteria briefly. So in this criteria of the teaching evaluation matrix, we have the first two criteria groups which are based on this individual perspective of the teacher. Teaching experience and development first. So to what kind of extent of teaching experience, but so that it is only included as one element, and it is not only that is making the point. So there must be also quality and diversity of teaching experience. And their applicant must show also own teaching assessment methods, what kind of using, and there must be some experience in supervision, bachelor's and master thesis, and some evidence of developing teaching methods and using feedback for development of teaching. And these are also then there are those whether they are excellent or whether they are poor or even failing. So there are descriptions how we can define that, whether the person is having excellence in teaching experience and developing, or whether it is poor or whether it is good. And then we have this part, there is that pedagogical training and thinking. And that includes ideas of these studies in university pedagogy or other pedagogical studies, so that the person has participated or performed pedagogical studies. And in the Faculty of Agriculture and Forest and Agriculture, they have excellence is needed 25 credits. And in my Faculty of Education, which is for teacher education, the criteria for this is 60 credits, because they all must have already a teacher qualification. But here is also some what kind of teacher education they may have, and other pedagogical studies and courses also equivalent, and how they provide of their idea of pedagogical thinking. These are quite qualitative issues. And then next slide. So there is also that they have a must have. So this is more about this criteria, these two about sharing and supporting community. And first is that ability to use and produce learning material. So there is that scope of learning material produced for higher education, for example, for writing a book or some other kind of teaching material. And then it is also the quality of learning material produced for higher education. What is the quality, how it is used, and whether the applicant is having some digital learning material environments, like using creating videos, teaching videos, or other ways, or podcasts, or creating some interesting online learning environments. And then we have a group that other teaching methods, which are all kind of activities that your applicant has participated in supporting the community, to supporting the department, or supporting the faculty to develop, or even working in national or in international way with other groups who are developing teaching and learning in higher education. There is a lot of list what kind of merit you can have, like being a director in a degree program, or like you have some expert duties related to teaching, like being a member in a teaching skills committee, or you have some different teaching development projects. And then you may have also research and publications related to teaching. And there are also, you have may earned that some special distinctions and prizes. So these are all, one should not have all these, but these are just an examples that which kind of teaching merits are included here. And then I think this is all. Then we have, yes, this criteria for demonstration of teaching skills. And that is a separate when there is a teaching demonstration. Then teaching demonstration in our university means that you have a 20 minutes time to demonstrate your teaching. And then you have some 10 minutes to respond to the questions of the audience. And in that 20 minutes time, you are supposed to show and provide evidence that you have a knowledge of the target group, those students to whom you are teaching, and you have knowledge and understanding of the context, and then you can give them these learning goals, and you are thinking about what kind of learning outcomes will come from your demonstration. And then you have a very expertise in the teaching content that you are also including in your teaching some evidence about your research, what you are doing in the research. And then you can show in this 20 minutes demonstration that you can use some kind of different teaching methods and aids that you can, for example, activate students to discuss in some group or use some kind of digital tools to activate them. And then in the end, you can have this that you also somehow review and assess the learning, that whether your students during this 20 minutes demonstration have learned something. And then there is overall teacher's performance, that what kind of voice you have and how you are, how relaxed you are and how you behave. And then one thing is still, which is not actually mentioned, but there is always this time management that you keep up in that 20 minutes time, because if you use it too less or use it too more, then it is also not so good. And this is that also which is assessed. And when we think about this, is that matrix is so that when you're as applicant for a teaching profession or researcher in our university, then your teaching portfolio is those 4 previous criteria which I presented. And then there is still this criteria for demonstration of teaching skills. And then in concluding all these together, then it is given the assessment of teaching competency from levels of excellence to the failed. So, okay, thank you, and I'm ready to answer your questions. You can stop sharing.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Anne. This was really in-depth presentation. So if anyone has that kind of a question that you want to Anne to clarify something, please raise your hand or write it in the chat, and then we can have a very short Q&A session here. So I see Norbert was the first. Norbert, please.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that inspiring presentation. I think many of us will make a SWOT analysis where we take your proposals, how to be a good teacher, and compare them what we are really doing. So thanks a lot for that. But I would have a question. So you showed about, I saw 5 blocks of teaching competences in higher education. What about adding a 6th block, teaching in extreme situations or in times of crisis? I think this is something we have experienced now in many parts in the world, that our traditional forms of teaching and learning did not work anymore, and we had to shift. And I think COVID is only one reason to think about it. We have catastrophes, natural catastrophes everywhere in the world. Maybe there could be a sixth block, teaching competence, teaching in extreme situations or in times of crisis.
Oh, thank you. That is a very good idea, because when I was thinking about it, I noticed that myself, I'm starting adding new and new because it seems to be such a complex area of teaching competency in higher education. And this is that maybe this comes with this professional development. It can be included in the professional development, so that you are, because if you have systematically developed your teaching then you were maybe more capable to change your teaching during the crisis. And you could maybe change and think about more fluently that, okay, I will do this, and this way I will do with the Zoom teaching. Actually, in my normal lecturing, I will lecture in this way, but now in the Zoom, this is not possible. So I changed my teaching a little bit differently. And so I know that during the last year, it has been really, really tough for all the academics to change so rapidly to their teaching. Online teaching, it was really difficult and hard. So thank you. I will add that. It's a really good time. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Norbert. So we continue discussion after the next presentation. So it looks like there is no that kind of urgent clarification needs. So let me then move on. Thanks, Anne, again. And now we have the next presenter. Just a minute. Next presenter is Dr. Wilson Kasolo from Uganda. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen. Thank you.
Good. So he has several experiences related to teaching, which are really relevant for our session. He has been, for example, Senior Education Fellow and Executive Secretary with the African Network of Agricultural, Agroforestry and Natural Resources Education, ANAFE, and also the head of Uganda Forest Sector Coordination Secretariat. And he is now emeritus principal of Nevgi, sorry, Forestry College, Uganda. So Wilson will now provide us a view of administrators. So Wilson, please. I will start sharing your presentation in a second. But you can start.
Yeah, thank you so much. Already. Greetings from Uganda, Kampala, and it's nice to be part of this great meeting, and it's nice to talk to you great participants. I'm going to give this topic perspective of an administrator, somebody who has been through it and has competently put the professional, technical, and academic elements of it. I just want to share with you what it was like and what I went through, because I was in need doing it and experiencing it and planning it. So I think that's what I want to bring on board, so that that side of it is probably made known to the participants. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, I think I'll want to is that maybe the first slide, please? You passed it. Back a bit. No, back. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, there, thank you. So basically, maybe to put my presentation and my ideas in perspective, I want to give you some insight into what the recruitment process for staff in particularly the vocational tertiary education institution is in Uganda, particularly referring to the TVET. And the TVET, our tertiary institutions, we have universities, and universities normally have their own recruiting agencies. I mean, they will have management offices, human resource managers, so they handle the recruitment of staff using their own offices and criteria they set up. But then for forestry colleges, like the one I was in, it is and it was still a public government institution. So basically all staff and workers of the government are recruited by the Public Service Commission, which is an agency responsible for recruiting all staff for government workers. So basically the forestry college staff would be recruited through the Public Service Commission, where the universities do have their own ways of recruiting, and they have their own human resource management offices that are responsible for recruiting staff. Now, when it comes to the forestry college, the process normally was adverts are made and giving the job description and job requirements. Normally, they will consult the college, and then you get to give in what you want. And they want a lecturer for utilization, a lecturer for forest management, lecturer for silviculture, that kind of thing. And you give the job description as to what you expect that person to do and what you expect from that person in terms of training. After the applications are received, the shortlisting is done, and the shortlisting is based on the credentials that are presented by the candidates. And then the interviews are conducted by the Public Service Commission, the recruiting agency. Normally, the public service would invite a representative from the college to handle the technical elements related to what you expect that person, the staff you're recruiting, to be undertaking. So a representative of the college would be part of the technical panel, would be part of the panel as the technical person. Now, normally the panel would interact with the candidate. There would be many of them, by the way, because jobs are scarce. So normally when a job is advertised, you would end up with about 20 or so people applying for the same job. And therefore, during the interviews, shortlisting is a hassle. And then during interviews, the candidates are normally given about 30 to 45 minutes interaction. And that time is what you have to assess the candidate for stability of a job you want to give him to teach in a forestry college. Normally, however, final decision as to who should be hired is made by public service. And when you go for interviews, the Public Service Commission reserves the right to recruit and appoint or offer a job to somebody they will finally have zeroed in on. And that is normally the case. Next slide. Now, as I said, although the interviews are made and people will be many, and the time for interviewing normally is very limited, and there are so many issues that come on board when it comes to critically looking at the competences and the requirements that you need in a person to get on board. A number of issues come on board. Some are what I'm calling exogenous shadows, things that you can't see, but they are there. And some of them are the emerging issues in forest management and utilization. There are certain things which come on board, and sometimes these teachers to handle, but they are not issues that ordinarily probably have been covered in the training of that candidate. For example, some time back we had emerging issues like agroforestry, emerging issues like climate change, and then now we have all this dimension of ICT. Ordinarily, you may not be able to assess and interview a candidate in terms relating to those things, because you yourself, as somebody on the panel, may not know them. They come on board. So basically, somebody may get a job, but when he gets a job, next day he finds himself or herself being required to talk about climate change. So basically, that competence, you would have not been able to assess that person, but it is something that he might have to take on as a part of his teaching assignment. And one thing that normally and was really common was favoritism. It was always, something you would see that some particular person, some candidate would probably be favored to take the job for various reasons that you may not know. But you would see that there's some bias towards a particular individual, and that particularly makes it difficult for you to stick seriously on the competences that probably you would find in candidate X in preference to candidate A. And that therefore would make it difficult for you to get a candidate of the choice that would really be most suitable. And that was common, and that would happen. You wouldn't rule it out. Finally, you would see candidate B, who was probably not so good as candidate A, getting the job. And candidate B would be falling short of so many elements in terms of competences that you would want to find in the teacher you're recruiting. And then on the panel, you would finally discover that there is a conflict of interest. For example, depending on the background of the panelists, there would be emphasis on issues that probably would not be so fundamental in terms of teaching forestry that you would want that person to have. But that person would push it, one of the panelists would be pushing that one to be one of the cardinal issues that should be considered when you are looking at the candidate that you've got to recruit. So conflict of interest would also come in to eventually make it difficult for you to measure the competencies of the staff very, very seriously and critically. Now, there are limitations to adequate, there are other limitations to adequate candidate assessment. Some of these limitations were, for example, inadequacies in interviewing panel composition. You would find that the composition of the panel would really be not so conducive, would not be such as to really bring out all those competencies you would want kind of like looked at and looked into in as far as the position is concerned. There would be, for example, people are falling short of certain technical requirements to be able to be on a panel and particularly do thorough and kind of like in-depth assessment of the candidate to make that person come out as the best. And then time available would also be limited for the assessment. For example, I talked of 30 to 45 minutes. Clearly, if you're looking at assessing somebody in detail and you're having this person for 30 minutes, you probably will not be able to go into depth, detail, to eventually get to know the position and the abilities of that person in terms of some of the competencies you'll be looking at. And then the challenge of relating academic credentials to required teaching competencies. You know what was common was that you would find this person with very good academic credentials, fantastic. But then relating what is in the academic documents to the ability of that person to teach the competences real would also be a challenge, because you're in the room, that person is probably not demonstrating, but also some of these things can only be assessed when that person is finally gotten out to teach. For example, if you're looking at somebody who should be able to do logging, you would want that person to probably fell a tree so that you can say how he's doing it perfectly, but you are in this boardroom, air conditioned. That makes it very difficult. And the environment, therefore, for assessing, especially for forestry teaching competences, was not conducive, such that you do not have the ability to fully assess the competences that you would want in this person, so that you know that you've gotten the right person to deliver the various courses that you want to do related to forestry. And then limitation for assessing practical skills. Clearly, I think as far as we are concerned, for example, at TVET level, practical aspects were very critical and very important. But then when you're interviewing these candidates, you do not have that much opportunity to find out whether they really are practically suitable to eventually impart the required skills, practical skills on the candidates that on your students. So basically, those were some of the limitations that were related to the assessment of these candidates to finally get what you would want out of them. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, measuring teaching competences when developing teaching competences when developing teacher competences. I think the issue here we are looking at is how can we measure the teaching competences as we intend, as we struggle to develop the competences of teachers? We, in my institution, or when I was involved, we would use of students' performance in exams. How do students perform in a certain, for example, if I'm looking at forest surveying, forest management, utilization, an exam we set, and because the exam would be normally set centrally, so that you are saying, how do the students perform in exams? When it comes to research, how do the students perform in their research projects? Because then when it comes to field work, how do the students perform in the field? And then the graduates, when students graduate, for example, somebody is looking for somebody to manage forest plantation. Somebody is employing your graduate. How does that graduate perform out to them? And what kind of feedback are you getting in terms of the performance of your graduates? So basically, these are some of the areas or elements that would be used to assess the development of the competences in a teacher. By looking at the performance of the exams, research projects done by the students, field work, and looking at what the employers and other stakeholders are saying about the graduates that this person has taught. And then we would also use annual performance evaluation assessment reports and sessions. We would get this lecturer, we undertake annual performance assessment, a one-on-one, you discuss and try to find out how the student, this teacher has performed, but also produce reports which you share with this teacher. And then during this session is also you exchange and try to find out issues related to his performance or performance, but also point out issues that are related to the performance of that teacher. But also you would be able to observe the general commitment of the teacher. You can see how committed the teacher is. You can see his interest because you will be his supervisor, and you can also get his performance. These could be good indicators, good issues or points that you would be looking at to eventually assess the development of the competences of this teacher as the time goes along and as we are using that person. And then we would also use the assessment, the students to assess students. I mean, students to assess the teachers. We use the system where we would have forms, and that after teachers deliver the lecture, the students fill in a form making comment. They would answer certain questions related to delivery capacity and the competence of this teacher. That would be very helpful because it would be taken by the head of the department, the supervisor of that teacher, but also it would be shared with that teacher to say, look, this is what your students are saying about you. And clearly, that would help teachers who are serious to eventually improve and consequently change and maybe get to another element, another aspect of looking at how they deliver their sessions. And then we would review teachers' academic portfolio. Because over time, teachers should take interest in improving the academic portfolio. If after 2-3 years, this teacher has not even had anything changing in his academic portfolio by way of training programs, it could be internships, attachments, clearly then you are having an issue with this person. But if you see a teacher every other year, there is something added on in terms of training, in terms of skills achievement and development, then that would also be one way of measuring the development of competences in the teacher that you're using. Next slide, please. Now, how do we help teachers to develop competencies? How are we doing it? We would use training programs, and some of these programs would be formal or non-formal. For example, people would go for long-term training programs. It could be masters, it could be PhD, but then there would be lots of other non-formal training activities. They could be for soft skills. They could be in short tailored courses within the institution and also outside the institution. That would be that we found that one would be very helpful. And also we used to have support. We used to have staff exchanges and internships. Getting our staff to be attached to some other institution under that teacher who is probably handling the same subject And going through the teaching and the management of the training programs would also help this teacher to build the skills that probably he was not having. And then we would also have undertake annual performance evaluations and target setting. When you're doing an assessment, annual performance evaluation, you do target setting and you say, teacher X, the following probably would help you if you work on them by the end of the year, so that this you are seen to be improving in elements A, B, C, D, Z. So annual performance evaluations and target setting is something that was very good, and I think something that I found working. And then we used to encourage sharing of encouraging and sharing regular assessments by students and supervisors. So we would really get the assessment shared, and would also get supervisors noted. Would get supervisors to really get to advise. I've noted that one. I'm concluding actually. Thank you so much. So we would also encourage this sharing of assessments and then use of incentives and awards. So we found this one quite helpful as a way of really helping teachers develop competencies. Next, we should be, I think, no more. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Wilson. Very, very interesting, and you know, a lot of things. We have seen that you have a lot of experience in this area, how to make selection of teachers and how to develop their competencies. There are some questions now in a chat, but I think they are more like general comments, not especially to clarification of your presentation. So we have limited time. So I now want to thank once more Wilson for your insight here. And what we will next do is we will revisit our starting point for this session. What we were thinking that is important when we answer those 4 questions. Can you see now them?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Instruction is now that once you have heard 2 excellent presentations on this topic, think about now critically what is 1 or 2 the most urgent issues that you want to stress. What should be developed? Are they something that should be put into the research project, or is there something that some organizations should take into the agenda, or anything? You can now revisit this this flinga. Can you see? Is it big enough? Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. Think about it. 1 or 2 issues. You can use this as an input and make your own new comment, or you can just pick up one of those what we have here visible. Just stay here. You have the access through the chat again. Thanks, Saya. There's a link. Minute or 2 use here thinking, and then I will open a next flinga where we do some new proposals based on your thinking, and we do also a voting, and then we have a very final discussion briefly. Is this okay? Understood? So it seems that the question number 4 has disappeared. So this is one of the disadvantages of this co-creation, that there might be errors. But the question 4 was about development, how to develop teaching competencies. Okay, I hope you are ready. I will now give you the next Flinga address in the chat, and we will move on. So idea here is that you just use the message box in the right upper corner, and you write your 1 or 2 proposals, and then just follow what others are proposing, and you can click like button, so you can give it. You can share your likes, so we will see what are the most important issues among all of us. And please deliver no more than 3 likes. Can you follow? Can anyone start?
Maybe you could repeat the concrete question for all, please.
Okay. So the idea is that you just select or you formulate what is the most urgent issue in assessing teaching competencies or developing teaching competencies. And then you just propose it to all others. Maybe I should have shown the task in a PowerPoint. I will do that again. So think about 1 or 2 most urgent topics that we had in the first Flinga, and just modify or combine them and write your proposal in this new platform. So we will see what are the most urgent topics in teaching competency assessment and teaching competency development. So we have one proposal here. Three proposals, very good. Just don't be too critical. We have only few minutes left, so just what is in your mind? This is anonymous. Don't be too critical. Make your proposals here. Okay, we have now seven proposals. Very good, very good. 8. And then I think you should be able to also click those proposals and just click the heart, the like icon there. Yes, somebody also already voted. So please do voting after you have made your own proposals, and maximum 3 votes per participant. Okay. So what is leading now is how do they use the theory in practical problem solving? So I mean, how they means is it the teachers? I guess it is teachers, or maybe students as well. And also 4 votes, balance between teaching and research time. Okay. If anyone wants to have an oral comment, please raise your hand. We have only 2 minutes left for this discussion, so-called discussion section of this breakout room. So anyone wants to make a quick oral comment, please raise your hand. Use the command Zoom or open your video. Seems there is no one. So still, which is leading is how do they use the theory in practical problem solving and establish didactic training centers at universities? That's the second one. Balance between teaching and research time, the third one. Yeah. Okay. Very good. So this was in a way like a like a discussion. We didn't have in a way the real conversation, but now I'm sharing you the final concluding remarks. If anyone wants to have information or be involved in our IUFRO forestry education working group, just do the registration there. There's a link. And I just also want to remind you about the call to action, which is common to this whole ITTO conference. So thanks all. I hope you have enjoyed and learned something. We will come back to you and let's keep in touch.